Well, good morning. It's great to be here on this beautiful day in Coogee with the Education Minister, Sarah Mitchell, and the Treasurer, Matt Kean, on what is a great day for our state. Hitting that 80% mark today, we have a number of restrictions being eased right across the board, but particularly for parents and kids, school is back. Took my son William to school this morning, massive queues, excited parents. We know though for many kids they'll be anxious. First day of school again for many, but just being up here and meeting some of the students, there's a lot of excitement. Many of our children have gone through a very difficult time, not being able to interact and play with their friends. To be back in the classroom is an exciting day for kids and for teachers and particularly for parents as well. I want to thank all our teachers. The vaccination rate for our teachers has made a real difference in being able to get our schools open as quickly as we have, and the sacrifices and the efforts they have made. The Department of Education working with the Teachers Federation to ensure that we got kids back in the classroom as quickly as possible. I really want to extend a big thank you to all our teachers, because they are key to the educational success of our children. We wanted to do this as quickly as possible, and the efforts that they have made have made a real difference to achieving this. Today, as well, as you know, 80% means that we're lifting many restrictions. The caps are gone on weddings and funerals. You can now stand up and have a drink in a bar. There are a number of restrictions in terms of home visitations. I spoke to many people over the weekend. I think one of the great aspects of lifting these restrictions has been many people being able to meet with their families again, grandparents being reunited with their grandkids. I know it was a big weekend for many families right across our state, and I want to thank again the people of New South Wales for the efforts that they have made in getting vaccinated. There's still a long way to go. This journey is not over. We have a first dose rate above 90%. We want to get that even higher, and if people can continue to make that effort, that will make a real difference to ensure we can open up as safely as possible. We do have an announcement today as part of the Treasurer's economic recovery plan, and we know that many of our kids have missed time in the classroom. We had a very successful school tutorship program last year where 7,500 tutors were put into classrooms across the state. See, that's been a bit more of a challenge this year, as with the Delta variant we had to close some of those schools, but today we're announcing that we'll extend that program all through 2022 at a cost of $383 million. So this is a significant investment, but an important investment. We do not want any kids across our state to fall behind in what has been a very difficult educational year, not just this year, but also last year. This program works. Minister Mitchell will speak more to it, but we want to put as much investment as we can to make sure that kids who may be struggling, who may have slipped through the cracks during what has been a challenging educational year, have that support available to them. So I want to thank Minister Mitchell for her advocacy in this area. We said, and the Treasury will continue to make this point, we said last year that those programs that worked, we will invest more and continue and expand. And this is a program that we know has been successful, and I want to thank Minister Mitchell for the work that she's done in this area, and now she'll provide some further detail, and the Treasurer will continue to talk about the work that he is doing in relation to the economic recovery.
Well, good morning, everybody. A very exciting day for literally hundreds of thousands of students and families right across New South Wales as we start our return to school. So obviously kindergarten, Year 1 and Year 12 students are back from today. Lots of happy smiling faces right across Sydney. We've seen it here at Randwick Public School. The kids are excited to be back. The teachers are excited to be back, and I know the parents are very relieved that learning from home has come to an end. Can I also just give a shout out to all of the people in education and health who've worked really closely to make sure we've got this school return underway. Our teachers, the rate that they have been vaccinated is just extraordinary. Our data now tells us more than 100,000 school staff have been vaccinated. We're sitting at about a 90% vaccination rate for our school and admin staff, which is great considering our deadline is still a few weeks away. I also want to give a shout out to our assets management teams. These are the guys who come in and help when we have natural disasters, bushfires, floods. They're the ones who've been doing our audit for ventilation, fixing windows, making sure everything is ready for our students to be back this week as well. And also, of course, to our teachers. The learning from home that they've done over the last term has just been extraordinary. The way that they've adapted, been flexible and really made sure they had that strong delivery of education. I think everybody across the state knows that we owe our teachers a lot of gratitude for everything that they've done. But now obviously we're back, and it's exciting to be back in the classroom and having students return. I also want to say thank you to the Premier and the Treasurer for this funding to continue our COVID tuition program. So much evidence and research shows that small group tuition, particularly in literacy and numeracy, makes a really big difference helping children catch up who might have fallen a bit behind during that learning from home period. So it's an extra $50 million as part of that program. This year we've had about $330 million. Next year it will be $380 million available for our school communities. So all of our public schools will be eligible to have this tuition program running, and a number of our Catholic and independent schools, particularly in areas where there's greatest disadvantage, will also be eligible for the funding. We'll have a real focus on southwestern and western Sydney as well. Of course, given that those school communities particularly have been some of the hardest hit during the pandemic, we want to make sure that we help those students catch up in those key areas of literacy and numeracy. It's great because, as the Premier said, it also means we've got about 7,500 extra staff on our school sites. So casual teachers are getting that work, retired teachers, final year university students, and also some of our student learning and support officers as well. As I've met with principals and teachers throughout the pandemic, all of them have been saying to me, this program is fantastic, can we please continue it? So really delighted today to be able to announce that we will. It's going to be very important to help our students catch up and get back on track after what has been a really challenging school year.
Thanks, Minister. Today is a really exciting day as our kindies, year ones and year 12s return to the classroom. That's 180,000 students that will get back to learning, face-to-face learning. So it's a great opportunity for us to give a shout out to all the homeschool heroes, the mums and dads out there that have helped get our kids through this very difficult period and ensuring they get an education at home. But we know that, like me, parents that were homeschooling, they weren't always educators. So we want to make sure that no kid is left behind. That's why we're investing $383 million in a COVID intensive learning program to ensure that any gaps that occurred are filled and that we employ teachers while doing so. We're going to employ 7,500 educators and teachers to make sure we plug any learning gaps that occurred because of homeschooling during the past period. We want to make sure that no kid is left behind, that they're able to continue seamlessly on their education journey. But by investing in our teachers and educators, we can create employment, drive our economy and ensure that no kid is left behind. That's what today's announcement is about as we continue our journey to getting our economy roaring and getting life back to normal as soon as possible.
Minister Mitchell, you said the program runs into next year. Will it run the whole year, or is there a date for how long it will go?
Yeah, no, so it'll run the entire school year next year as well, and that's really important because obviously, you know, when schools are working out how they're going to make this program work in their school community, they can plan their staffing accordingly for the entire school year. So they know it's in place until the end of this year, and today, of course, we're announcing it'll run for the entirety of 2022 as well, which is great.
When did you make the decision on this? Because this was called for by Chris Minns in his budget reply speech last week.
Yeah, well, look, it's something we've been looking at for a while. I think the Premier, when he was Treasurer, made some comments several weeks ago that this was something that we would be looking at continuing. So maybe this is a case of the opposition copying our homework. We'd always said that we would look at extending this program, and happy to announce it today.
Premier, the 80% roadmap kicks off today, but in a lot of the regions we know that their double max rate is in the early 60s still. Should regional people be more cautious in the freedoms that they're accessing, and how are you ramping up those rollouts next year?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously from a health perspective, we have enough supply when it comes to this vaccine rollout, and we encourage all people in regional New South Wales who are doing a great job. The efforts in regional New South Wales, just like in Sydney, have been phenomenal. But we say whether you're in Sydney or regional New South Wales, as we lift these restrictions, we're obviously doing so in a measured way, and we want people to continue to follow their health rules that are in place, as painful and difficult as sometimes as they are. They keep people safe, and that's why there are still some restrictions in place at 80% as we move towards the end of the year. But look, we're very hopeful in terms of those numbers in regional New South Wales. I think things are going very well. Obviously, we've made some changes in holding that back that date, but we'll continue to work with our regions. I know Susan Pearce and their health team are doing a phenomenal job in making sure this vaccine rollout continues to go as successfully as it has over the last few months.
Is it the case that masks still need to be worn inside the common areas of apartment buildings and strata complexes? From today, I think I asked you about this about a week ago, and you said you'd be providing advice.
I'll check that. But my understanding is in relation to face masks that they are not mandatory in office buildings, but in other common areas where other common public areas, then we are still having the requirement that people need to wear face masks. We've done that because obviously we still want to get that vaccination rate up. We want to keep people safe. I know it can be annoying for many people, but it's the right thing to do. And obviously from today, people do not have to wear those face masks in the office. But specifically in relation to strata, I'll find out for you today.
First of all, congratulations.
Thanks, Kenny.
With community sport in indoor areas, some clubs have sort of said, oh, look, it's unviable for us at this stage with
Yeah.
capacity limits inside of indoor sports. Is there any way that we can kind of relax?
I'm looking at that, and the Cabinet will look at that at the next committee meeting in relation to community sport. We've certainly heard that feedback. Just like we want kids back in school, we particularly want kids back playing sport, and obviously those restrictions are lifted today, but we've heard feedback, particularly with indoor caps and the like, so we will be looking at that at the Cabinet meeting this week.
What happens between now and December 1? How many restrictions
Well, that's really a matter for the Cabinet. I mean, we've set out a very clear roadmap, and as you'd be aware, we've changed that roadmap from time to time. And that's because, we look at the health and the economic advice and mental health support. Kenny's just raised the issue in relation to community sport. Like we want to provide as much certainty as possible, but if there are things that can be lifted at various points in time, we will look at that. And I think that's what you'll see. But ultimately, that roadmap provides the confidence to the community, to the public and to businesses about where the state's going. There'll be challenges along the way, but where we can lift restrictions, we will. But and we're not doggedly going to pursue what's in place for the sake of it. If it makes sense to lift certain restrictions at various points in time, we will.
New case numbers today, 265
Yeah.
from 60,000 odd tests.
Yeah.
Is the advice that you're getting that downward trend will continue, or do you expect a rise as we move about a week since
Yeah.
the so-called Freedom Day? Because epidemiologists have been saying
2 weeks.
about a week.
Yeah, that's what we expect, Bob.
So are you expecting a rise, and has health given you a number as to what?
No, we've got a sense, and they've in terms of the advice they've provided the Cabinet, what I'd say is we would think in the next couple of weeks that as mobility increases across the state, as restrictions are lifted, case numbers will increase, and that will be a challenge. That will be a challenge for our state, but our health system is very strong. Obviously, we would expect hospitalisations to increase as well, but that's why we need everybody to keep looking after each other. This is not over. There's a long journey to go. We need to open up the state. We are doing so in a safe way, but that will naturally lead to an increase in case numbers over time.
Have they given you any idea? Can you share?
No. I mean, there's advice that's in confidence. We released some information by the previous Premier in relation to those hospitalisation rates and the surge capacity in our hospitals. We are very confident where we stand today. It's pleasing to see those case numbers going down. Testing, though, is also down, so we obviously want to encourage people to continue to go out and get tested if you have any symptoms. And if you do have symptoms and you feel sick, don't go to work. Don't go out. This is all about looking after each other during this difficult time. We want to open up safely, and the best thing we can do is look out for our neighbour.
On that note of neighbours, on Friday, Victoria announced a major easing of restrictions with its border with New South Wales.
Yeah.
It appears that only a negative test is required from 12 hotspots going into Victoria.
Yeah.
What's the arrangements from New South Wales side? Do Victorians travelling into our state still have to stay at home for 2 weeks?
Well, that's the current situation, and I'll have discussions with the Victorian Premier. I think it's pleasing to see their restrictions are easing. I think that's a great win for the people of Victoria. I mean, we've had a difficult time in New South Wales, but Victoria's gone through a very, very challenging time, and their case numbers are still high, and we wish them well, but it's pleasing to see they're opening up. I've already had discussions with the Victorian Premier in relation to the border and how we'll deal with that going forward. Obviously, they're front and centre for them right now is making sure they get their case numbers down, and then we'll continue those discussions, because the quicker we can open up, the better. But we want to do that in a safe way, and I've started those discussions with Dan Andrews, and I'll continue them. No. Sorry, so I missed the question.
Have you had any contact with
Yeah.
ahead of today? Will you be watching?
No, I'll be working for the people of New South Wales today, and so will all my team. I had a chat with the former Premier over the course of the weekend to check in how she was doing, and she's doing well. My ministerial team are focused on the people of the state. The integrity agencies will do their work, and we'll go from there.
Concerned about what might come out of today's hearings?
No, I mean, look, there are always public hearings when it comes to the Independent Commission Against Corruption. They've got a job to do. They should do the job. If there's anything that the New South Wales government needs to act on following these inquiries, then we will. But obviously, we'll just wait, and I'm not going to provide a running commentary in relation to these public inquiries.
Are you considering appointing?
How's the family feeling about baby number 7?
They're great, excited, more chaos. If anyone, Matt's going to have a problem with the active kids vouchers because I don't think we budgeted for this. But if anyone's got a second-hand minivan they want to sell, please contact my office.
Are you considering appointing Jodie McKay as a trade envoy?
No.
Has there been any consideration or deliberation that you're aware of about an appointment?
Oh, there are always discussions, and I for one, believe that former members of Parliament make good ambassadors and trade commissioners. I think it is a role that politicians, as unpopular as this may sound, that's a job that I think is well suited to former politicians, and people who have provided years of service in public life should certainly be in the mix. But I've had no, in terms of those appointments, they haven't come before the cabinet.
Have you had another conversation with the Prime Minister about the international border? Was that a slap down of the Prime Minister?
No, not really. I mean, my view in relation to that is incredibly clear. We have drawn a line and said there is no hotel quarantine for those who are fully vaccinated, and we're not going to discriminate whether or not you're a returning Australian or a tourist or anyone from any other country, an international student. That's an important first step. So as the Prime Minister's pointed out, New South Wales doesn't set the visa arrangements. We accept that. We accept our place here in this country. But I'll make the point that this is a first step that shows that New South Wales is leading the nation out of the pandemic. And I think what it demonstrates is by moving in this direction, we'll get returning Australians home faster. I want to help other states in terms of their citizens coming home. I think that's really important, and particularly when you look at case numbers and the fact that other states will now have to obviously open their borders in difficult circumstances. I think we're well positioned here to help all Australians around the world come home, and we want to get tourism back. As the Treasurer said, I think on Saturday, these are important industries. It's not like we're prioritising tourists over Aussies. We're saying we want everyone to come back. And there are so many people across our state who rely on international students and who rely on tourism for work, and so they can put food on their table. So the quicker we get back to normality, the better. And here in New South Wales, we will always drive that going forward. Before uni, yeah. As quickly as possible. I think I saw Dan Kean over the weekend give some positive commentary around wanting tourism back before the end of the year. I think that's positive. If we can get returning Australians home, and there's capacity to do that, I don't understand why we wouldn't have tourists and international students back as quickly as possible. If we can do that this side of Christmas, what a great thing that will be. We're doing it for international students with our pilot, and just like pilots, if the pilots are successful, we'll expand them over time. But we need to open up. We need to rejoin. The world. I mean, I was watching the NFL early this morning at 3 o'clock, and Jacksonville won their first game of the season and broke the second longest losing streak in NFL history. But that was there they were at Wembley, packed crowd. We need to get back on living life in a safe way as possible, and I think the measures that we've put in place are sensible. It's a common sense approach, but we need to open up as quickly as possible and as safely as possible, and get tourists back, get students back, but get Aussies back as well. And if we can play a role in doing that, we will.
Daniel Andrews has given regional Victorians the assurance that he won't lock down regional areas once all the lockdowns lift.
Right.
New South Wales residents don't have that same assurance from our government.
Well, we've certainly said that following the national plan, we agree with the approach that from time to time there may be the case that we will need to target restrictions in different areas. So we've said that. But as I've said, I've made it very clear, I don't want our state to go into lockdown again. Lockdowns are a last resort, not a first resort. I couldn't be clearer in relation to that. Well, what the government's position is that there may be from time to time the need to put certain restrictions in place that are targeted. There will be challenges ahead. Today is a great day, sunny day, bright times ahead for our state. But sometimes it's difficult to know exactly what's coming around the corner, and we need to prepare for that. Vaccination has been the key to doing that, and I don't want to go into lockdown again. I don't want our state to go backwards. I want to go forward. This is about building confidence in our state as we open up. But look, there may be if there are health challenges in certain areas, then we would at certain points in time need to potentially put some restrictions in. But we'll work through that. Let's not preempt where that goes. But that's part of the national plan, and we support the national plan.
You say masks come off today. What happens in offices as more people come back if someone does test positive? I mean, previously whole office blocks and whole floors of buildings were empty. What happens now? New South Wales Health can't come in and look at every case. No, Health will look at it on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, they've raised that with me. Close contacts, obviously, the definition of a close contact is restricted now to family members or to higher risk environments like nursing homes and the like. So that's not classified as an office environment. So Health the advice we've received from Health is they will look at those cases, but in the circumstances that we find ourselves in, they do not see the need that if somebody does have COVID in an office environment, that will be deemed to be a close contact. I do make the point though, if you are unvaccinated, you have to wear a mask in the office. That is still the requirement in relation to these new rule changes that come in today.
New South Wales is no longer declared a hotspot, and that means that over the next couple of weeks, those hotspot-related financial support
Yeah.
the federal government are winding up. Does that concern you at all for the people of New South Wales that may still need support?
Well, we continued our support of the JobSaver program. That's 15% of payroll. So there was 15% contribution from 15% was covered by 50% was covered by the Commonwealth, but we obviously had a 30% payroll payment to businesses. Now, we are still continuing our program because we accept that we've kept some restrictions in place and that some businesses across New South Wales are not operating at full capacity. So that continues. Obviously, we want to make sure that as many people move from receiving that disaster payment back into paid wages. That's what happened last year. These programs can't continue indefinitely. You need to scale them back. The work the Treasurer is doing at the moment in relation to the economic recovery is pivoting from direct payments in many cases into stimulus and support for businesses and for workers across the state. So that's where the changes will be. We know there's a long way to go, and we'll continue to provide financial support where we believe it's necessary. We want to get workers back into work. We want businesses to open, and some of the support measures already, such as the stock guarantee, which the Treasurer announced, will provide certainty for businesses to stock up over summer, get things back. I'm very, very confident we're going to bounce back strong here in New South Wales. I'm very, very confident. We've lost around over 250,000 jobs that we've seen recently, but we lost more last year and we recovered every single one of them plus more. So this will be more challenging this time around, but I'm incredibly confident the support measures we have in place will get people back into work and get businesses open as quickly as possible. What's he saying?
Well, we're not talking about visas and passports. We're talking about ending hotel quarantine. What Friday was all about was that New South Wales is open for business. We are moving on. We want to open up. We want to keep people safe, and that's exactly what our measures we announced on Friday will do. If you're a returning Australian and you are fully vaccinated from November 1, you won't have to hotel quarantine. It's the New South Wales government that's paying for the hotel quarantine of not just returning Australians here, but also from other states. I appreciate Victoria has paid their bill to New South Wales. But my view in terms of opening up is that this is a strong direction and a strong lead from New South Wales. We are saying what we want to get returning Australians, tourists, international students back as quickly as possible. We've been passionate about that through last year. We're the first state to bring back international students with our pilot, and if we can look at expanding that, and we worked very closely last year and prior to the Delta outbreak with the federal government about getting that pilot off the ground. And look, I'll have a great relationship with the premiers. I think we can learn from each other. Where we can support each other during this period of time, we will. I had that relationship with the treasurers. I'm sure the new treasurer will have that relationship with his counterparts as well. When we work together, learn from each other as we go through this, I think that's going to make our country better. There are many challenges that are going to come our way. We can provide advice on we provide advice on stimulus support. We'll provide advice on health support. So whatever we can do to help each other, to help the other premiers, we will.
Minister Mitchell, can I just ask just about masks in schools?
Yep.
So high school students and teachers and school staff mandatory, primary school strongly recommended. Is there any kind of time frame that you can give parents about when those rules will be evaluated, or do you see that being the case for the rest of this year?
Yeah, so obviously we're working with health in terms of that return to school plan on what we call our level 3 settings, which is how we're welcoming kids back into the classroom from today. Masks are required for all our staff and for our high school kids and recommended for primary, but it's only indoors, it's not outdoors. And again, it's just in line with doing what we can to keep our schools safe and stop that transmission. But we are talking to health literally on a daily basis about the rules in schools. Obviously, the next tier down of restrictions moves away from mask wearing. You know, I understand it can be challenging. As soon as we're able to do that based on the health advice, we will look to have those masks removed, but we just need to stick with this, particularly for these first few weeks for our return to school, and we'll keep evaluating that with health.
So do you wait for all students to return and then give it a couple of weeks and evaluate it? Is that what health has said?
Yeah, so look, obviously, as I said, we are literally speaking to health on a daily basis. We'll see how we go this week with Kinder Year 1 and Year 12, of course, with all the other year groups coming back next week. In the regions, for instance, we've had more than 700 regional schools back now for a few weeks. They've been dealing with the mask wearing and having a common sense approach. That's what we ask for. And as soon as we can ease any restrictions on school sites, we will. Yes, that includes mask wearing, but it also looks at things like, being able to welcome mum and dads back on site, have activities again. This is all what we want to get back to. For me as Education Minister, I want us to be there as soon as possible. I want our schools to be normal as soon as we can, but we just need to do that in partnership with health to make sure we take all proper precautions.
Yes, so is it likely we could still see school shutdowns in regional areas? We've had a lot of school outbreaks lately. Is the plan to just keep them open, or
Yeah.
too much would you close?
Yeah, so obviously when it comes to sort of, large scale learning from home, that's something that I don't ever want to see again as Education Minister. It's really difficult. It's challenging for our parents, it's challenging for our students and for our teachers. But we will still work with health in terms of what we need to do if there are local outbreaks in community, what role education will play in terms of any suppression strategies going forward. When it comes to individual cases that impact schools, we'll keep working with health. The reality is when there's cases in our communities, we do see cases at schools, and that's been the case over the last 18 months. But what we've really refined now is our processes around what happens when there's a positive case. We've closed, we've contact traced, we clean. Usually that only takes about a day, so the disruption is minimal. But we're now talking to health about, well, what can we do to make that even less of a disruption? If you've got a fully vaccinated staff member, for instance, is the person who tests positive, how is that different now? We've got vaccinated staff, higher vaccination rates amongst our high school age children, for instance. So the whole point is to try to minimise how many schools are shut and how long they are closed for with a COVID case, and not have as many close contacts or people out of the classroom for extended periods of time. So what I envisage will happen is that we'll start to see less and less disruption because of COVID in our school communities, and that's a positive thing.
Mr Mitchell, as a senior leader of the New South Wales Nationals, what do you make of the situation going on with your federal colleagues and
Yeah, I mean, well, look, obviously for us here in New South Wales, you know, our National Party room is strongly behind the targets that we have here. And I do just want to acknowledge the Treasurer and still Minister for Energy for the work that's happened. You know, I think for me as a Nat who lives in a regional communities, I'm really conscious of the impacts of climate change. And I think looking forward for, you know, my kids, what kind of future do I want to leave for them? We've got really, really good programs in New South Wales, a lot of things underway over the next, you know, decades to come. And Matt could talk in a lot more detail than me about that. But, you know, we're supportive of where our government's position is on climate change. I think obviously the Federal Party room need to have their deliberations. I'll leave that as a matter for them. But I see a lot of opportunity with some of the work that we're doing around net zero. You know, even in an education space, we've got some really exciting pilots underway using solar, using battery capture, you know, doing our bit in terms of energy efficiency. And I think there's good opportunities for local businesses, for regional communities, if we embrace these opportunities.
Hopefully soon. So the Department of Premier and Cabinet is working with the New South Wales Electoral Commission in relation to setting a date. So I'll just take the advice from the Electoral Commission. Obviously, I think it's important that those matters are settled as quickly as possible. Communities need to have strong representation in the Parliament, but I'll get that advice shortly. I know the Department of Premier and Cabinet's reached out to the Commission and they're working through dates. I think it's slightly complicated because of the local government elections that are also due to be held in December, so they've got to factor that in.
The New South Wales Electoral Commissioner said he probably can't run them both at the same time because he didn't get money in the last budget. Is that a mistake?
Look, there's not one area of government that doesn't complain about getting funding. I can tell you as Treasurer and Treasurer Kean's going to realise that very soon as well. No one in government ever comes to the Treasurer and says thank you for giving us extra funding.
We've been asking Labor about whether they'll contest the by-election seats now that we know about Stratford. Will your party be?
Oh, that's a matter for the Liberal. That's a matter for the Liberal Party. I haven't had discussions with the state director yet. Obviously, Jodie made that announcement on the weekend. I wish her all the very best. She's somebody who's served her community well and given a lot to public service in New South Wales. And I think from time to time, members of Parliament move on. But let's not forget the service they provided their people, because politics is a pretty demanding and grueling job. And ultimately, we're here to make a difference and leave the place better than we found it. And Jodie's certainly been somebody who has served her community as well over the period of time she's been in the Parliament, both in the seat of Newcastle and the seat of Strathfield. My expectation is that we'll be having those discussions in the Cabinet meeting this week with the health, with New South Wales Health and the Health Minister. These have been ongoing discussions. We obviously want to get elective surgery back as quickly as possible for those non-urgent. Well, I mean, when a non-urgent elective surgery is still important surgery. So the quicker we can get that back, we're working with health. Obviously, they've got to allocate their resources to do it in a safe way, but we'll be having a discussion about that this week. Thanks very much.